A palpable tension hung in the editorial office, like the calm before a storm. Oleg Vasilyevich Dubov, the esteemed chief editor of the literary magazine, thoughtfully ran his fingers through his hair, a gesture that always unsettled his subordinates. It was an unmistakable sign the boss was in despair, and a tempest was brewing. His glasses slid precariously down his nose, his face was a mask of intense concentration, and his hair resembled a disheveled broom. Yet, his staff indulged their eccentric superior. Despite his quirks, Dubov was a fair man who never oppressed or humiliated them, and he always found a way to secure their salaries, even during the toughest times. This time, however, even his usual ritual offered Dubov no escape from the deadlock. The culprit was a manuscript brought in by the unassuming Mr. Nedoropkin. It was ironic that this particular work had found its way to Lira, the only literary magazine in the entire region. Then again, perhaps this was exactly where the manuscript belonged, for it was far from mediocre. Indeed, one might even call it brilliant. From the very first pages of the story titled Bird Flock, Dubov was captivated. It had everything: a gripping plot, Chekhovian clarity of prose, subtle humor, masterfully crafted characters, and an understated delivery. In all his years at the magazine, Dubov had not encountered a single author he could even label as promising. It seemed talent simply didn't take root in provincial soil. Or perhaps gifted individuals simply gravitated towards the capital, where they saw greater opportunities to realize their potential. And now, Nedoropkin had decided to try his luck in the provinces. The arrival of this timid man with frightened eyes and a childlike tendency to blush was a true revelation for the editor. Stuttering and apologizing profusely, Nedoropkin handed over his manuscript, unaware of the sensation it would cause. Dubov was accustomed to the works of regular contributors whose pieces graced the pages of Lira issue after issue. Take, for instance, the poetess Darina Barskaya, known for her lengthy, often nonsensical poems, which she loved to recite in a sing-song voice. The chief editor had long since stopped searching for meaning in her convoluted metaphors and hyperbole. He simply approved them for publication without delving into their content. Meanwhile, the proofreader, Lydia Borisovna, a strict and principled woman, was forced to wade through these thickets, hunting for errors and typos. She bravely edited the texts, secretly despising Barskaya, as well as the fabulist Aristarch Morozov, the feuilletonist Psholkin, whose works never elicited even a faint smile, and the modernist novelist Arkhip L. But Lydia Borisovna's true nightmare was the prose writer Vlad Struinikov, director of the local school. This prolific author churned out novels, novellas, and short stories in incredible quantities, using the same tired clichés: the calloused hands of the plowman, peasant sweat, golden wheat ears. How does Struinikov himself not get tired of it? Dubov often wondered. To somehow ease the proofreader's burden, the chief editor introduced a golden pen section in the magazine, featuring works by literary classics. But instead of gratitude, Lydia Borisovna secretly wished that this section would occupy 95% of the entire print space. Such is human nature. Give them an inch, and they'll take a mile. One of the magazine's persistent problem areas was the Young Talents section, where unfortunately only the first word truly applied. The giftedness of these young authors was as elusive as that of their more seasoned counterparts, though they possessed an elevated self-assurance born of youthful maximalism and lack of life experience. The chief editor had grown weary of these displays. The creative explorations and discoveries of these local diamonds in the rough had long ceased to interest him. He viewed their works as a necessary evil, automatically sending them to print. Ultimately, it wasn't a significant concern. Dubov himself, a journalist by profession, had never attempted to write creatively, recognizing his own lack of literary talent. Early in his career, he had dreamed of discovering a new literary star who would bring fame to Lyra and its humble editor. Over time, those dreams had faded. However, upon seeing Netaropkin's manuscript, he felt that sometimes dreams do come true. Though not a writer himself, the chief editor possessed the talent of a discerning reader. As the blushing and shy Netaropkin mumbled incoherently from the sunken armchair, Dubov was overcome with elation. "I found it! I found it!" Paraphrasing Mayakovsky, after sifting through tons of verbal ore, he had finally stumbled upon a golden nugget. Who would have thought this discovery would turn into such a problem? "Listen, esteemed Mikhail Gennadievich," the author timidly began, as if bracing for the worst. Unlike Lyra's other contributors, Netaropkin seemed to have no faith in his own talent and was constantly plagued by doubt. "Mikhail Gennadievich, of course," Dubov gently agreed. "I'll take the manuscript to study it carefully and make a decision about publication. For now, I've only skimmed your text. Stop by this evening, all right?" In reality, a different decision was required. The hesitant Netaropkin had brought his manuscript at the very moment the next issue of the magazine was already laid out. The mock-up pages were crammed with excerpts from novels, novellas, feuilletons, fables, poems, and verse. There simply was no room for Birdflock. The magazine consisted of 68 pages, excluding the cover, and increasing its volume was impossible due to financial constraints. In truth, such an idea had never even crossed Dubov's mind. But if he were to consider it now, he would have to add about 5 spreads, or 10 pages, as Netaropkin's story was quite substantial. Who would pay for that? There were no takers. This meant someone would have to be pushed aside, excluded from the issue. As Netaropkin backed out of the office, stumbling over his words, Oleg Vasilievich frantically pondered whom he could possibly remove. 2 hours later, however, he realized it was impossible. How could this have happened? A tragic confluence of circumstances. The issue's main feature was Darina Barskaya's 50th birthday. Oh, the trouble that birthday girl had caused, it was better not to dwell on it. Initially, the poetess had insisted that the entire issue be dedicated to her immortal creations. They eventually settled on 5 spreads, a cover photo, and a lengthy interview. Incidentally, the interview, penned by local journalist Ryabov, was, in Dubov's opinion, far more lively and engaging than all the poetess's work combined. Ryabov knew his craft, and after reading the article, a reader might form the impression of Dasha Babushkina, Darina Barskaya's real name, as a multifaceted, witty, and vibrant personality. Thus, the enterprising poetess occupied a full 14 pages of the magazine, including the editor's note and the table of contents. This amounted to nearly a quarter of the issue. They even had to forego the golden pen section. Poor Lydia Borisovna didn't know about it yet. It meant Dasha Babushkina had effectively bumped Alexander Blok himself, whom the chief editor had planned to include in that section. Dubov scowled at Darina Barskaya's cover photo. 50 years old, and she still didn't understand that those elaborate curls and ringlets made her resemble a bespectacled poodle. Next, Vlad Strichkov occupied 12 pages. He absolutely could not be moved, or a scandal would erupt that could cost Dubov his position. Moreover, the editorial office was located in a charming school annex, for which the director charged a symbolic rent, ensuring his consistent presence in the magazine's pages. Last year, Vladimir Petrovich had also taken the helm of the local literary society, and now the magazine featured his personal column, Servants of the Muse. The Muse, of course, could only dream of such servants. Nevertheless, one had to graciously allocate a spread. The chief editor grunted in displeasure, walked to the window, and opened the transom. A blast of cold air hit his face. The frosts were severe. Dubov began pacing his office. He always thought better when moving. Today, however, this method offered no relief. A saving idea simply wouldn't come. Oleg Vasilievich lingered at the window, enjoying the frosty freshness, but recalling his not fully recovered cold, he quickly closed the transom and returned to his desk. He delved into the papers, examining the layout of the latest issue. What else awaited him on the editorial list? The Young Talents section featured the daughter of a high-ranking city official. Here, as the saying goes, no comments were necessary. Everything was self-explanatory. Next was the advertising block, inviolable by definition. And finally, the Fultonist, the fabulist, and a representative of the modernist literary movement. Arkhip L. was, without a doubt, a figure best left untouched. As befits a true modernist, he was characterized by an unstable psyche. The slightest disagreement with his work could lead to unpredictable consequences. Oleg Vasilievich had once dared to reject one of his pieces and had preferred not to risk it since. Rumor had it that his wife hadn't dared to divorce him for several years, unwilling to bear the sin. As a result, the mentally unstable novelist enjoyed a strong marriage and stable fees for his regular publications. Cholkin had delivered on his assignment this time. The chief physician of the local hospital had recently been removed from his post for bribery, and our esteemed satirist had created a piece light in form, but, in the author's own opinion, sharp and biting. Reading this tedious stuff was simply impossible. But who would dare explain to a 60-year-old distinguished writer and union member that a sparkling feuilleton shouldn't contain such an abundance of cumbersome participial and gerundial phrases? All right, Cholkin would remain. But there was still the fabulist Aristarch Morozov. He, in principle, could be moved without much concern. However, this didn't solve anything. His fables already occupied a modest 1.5 spreads, and at least 5 were needed. The workday was drawing to a close. In the cramped reception area, the secretary, Larissa, began to cough pointedly. Dubov, irritated, called out that she could go home and he would continue working. But no matter how much he worked, economized, speculated, racked his brain, paced the office, or sighed, everything indicated that Netoropkin wouldn't make it into this issue. Oleg Vasilievich was in despair. As he pondered what to say to the author, searching for the right words, Netoropkin himself appeared in the doorway, cleared his throat, and blurted out his pre-rehearsed line, "Good evening. I've come as you instructed. What about my manuscript?" And of course he didn't forget his customary "I apologize" at the end. He had suffered through it, held his breath, waiting. Now it was Dubov's turn, but unlike Netoropkin, he hadn't had time to prepare for the conversation, and so blurted out the truth on the spot. I have no good news for you. Please sit down. Why are you standing? Listen, Mikhail Gennadyevich, Netoropkin said resignedly. Yes, Mikhail Gennadyevich, Dubov repeated sourly. We cannot publish your story in this issue. I understand. Netoropkin quietly exhaled, his voice falling. He no longer apologized. No, you don't understand anything. The chief editor suddenly burst out, a surge of anger rising within him. Your manuscript is good, very good, excellent even, but I can't publish it. We don't have enough space, and I can't simply remove anyone else. Oh no, why would you remove anyone? Please don't remove anyone because of me, Netoropkin said, startled, and blushed. I didn't mean anything like that. Respected authors. What does respected have to do with it? Dubov interrupted, his anger flaring further. It's just circumstances, you understand. One has a jubilee, another has connections, a third has a delicate psyche. You can't touch them. I understand, Netoropkin said again. So, Mikhail. Dubov stammered again, impatiently snapping his fingers. You can just call me Mikhail, Netoropkin interjected, tired of waiting for the editor to remember his patronymic. Well, you're a grown man, Mikhail. You understand how things are. If it were solely up to me, it would be a different story. Dubov caught himself justifying his actions like a schoolboy, which infuriated him. Who was this Netoropkin anyway? Yet, he couldn't help but explain. In short, you know what country you live in, don't you? And besides, you came to us rather late, the chief editor concluded. Netoropkin nodded sadly and began to rise from his chair. Oleg Vasilievich waved his hands in protest, urging him to sit back down. Wait. Your story will definitely be in the next issue. We publish in 3 months. Dubov stopped short, his sentence unfinished. He remembered that the April issue was entirely commissioned, dedicated to their town's 40th anniversary. It was a minor jubilee. People often didn't even celebrate such dates, and the town of Ensk itself had been born from a party decree. A giant factory was once built, and, as often happens, a settlement sprang up nearby, marked on the map of Russia not even by a circle, but by a tiny dot. However, this small-scale occasion presented great opportunities. Funds were allocated for the celebration, and these funds needed to be utilized. As for Lyra specifically, with its meager existing funding, Dubov simply couldn't afford not to take advantage of the opportunity to earn money from paid articles. There were so many holes in the magazine's budget that the chief editor wouldn't mind celebrating anniversaries annually. All of this meant that Bird Flock and its author were once again out of luck. However, the hope for publication in the upcoming issue proved fleeting once more. No, it won't work next time either, came the categorical statement. It's City Day then. Oleg Vasilievich, expressing his irritation, took off his glasses, and the world before him instantly blurred, turning Netoropkin into an indistinct silhouette. Dubov, restoring his vision with his glasses, observed the scene. Well, I suppose I'll go, Netoropkin said sadly. But in 6 months I will definitely publish you, the chief editor solemnly promised. You can consider yourself already in the issue. Yet deep down, he himself doubted it. 6 months was an eternity, during which anything could happen, be it another jubilee or a somber event. Netoropkin, it seemed, shared his skepticism. Hunching his shoulders, he tried to conceal his disappointment, said a hurried goodbye, picked up his manuscript, and headed for the exit. "Mikhail," Oleg Vasilievich quietly addressed him. "What is your profession?" "An engineer." "Now you'll probably advise me to return to my direct duties," Nedoropkin replied with unexpected tartness. "To forget about literature." "Not at all," the chief editor wearily countered. "You absolutely must pursue it. In fact, you absolutely must immerse yourself in it. It is your calling. But lyra and literature are two different things. Do you write much?" "A novel, 3 novellas, and about 20 short stories, and a play," Nedoropkin answered, a little flustered. "If they are as good as Bird Flock, then you will definitely succeed. I can tell you that, for certain." "Thank you," Nedoropkin mumbled shyly. 5 minutes later, buoyed by hope, he was already rushing down the corridor, clutching a slip of paper with a phone number in his hand. Dubov had useful connections in the capital. Meanwhile, the chief editor stood by the window, thoughtfully gazing at the street, which was now enveloped in darkness. He watched Nedoropkin stumble as he ran out of the annex and almost skipped towards the school gates, comically kicking up his legs. May at least his dream come true, he thought. Suddenly, the phone rang. Oleg Vasilievich automatically picked it up. It was Darina Barskaya, inquiring if she could receive more complimentary copies of the magazine for her jubilee.